The fire started before sunrise. A refinery that took 90 years to build and $7 billion to modernize, gone in hours. Not damaged, not slowed down, gone. By the time the emergency units arrived, the sky above Manama was already black. Thick columns of smoke visible from highways across the entire island. Every fire crew in Bahrain mobilized at once, and while the flames were still climbing, the legal team was already typing. And within the same morning, a legal document landed in the inbox of every single company that depends on that fuel. Two words that in peacetime live in contract law textbooks. In wartime, they mean something much simpler. We have been hit. We are down. Force majeure. Contracts canceled. Deliveries suspended. No timeline for resumption. Here is the number that tells you what that means for every person alive on Earth today. Brent crude, $119 per barrel. That is 60% higher than the day this war began. 60%. In 10 days. The largest sustained oil price spike in over half a century. Bloomberg confirmed this morning that $6 trillion in global stock market value has been erased since February 28th. Not from one country. From every market on Earth, simultaneously. Later, I'll show you the exact price Iran has publicly announced as its target, and how close they already are. To understand why $119 matters to you, whether you live in Tokyo, Berlin, or Iowa, you need to understand what just went offline. Bahrain's only oil refinery. A facility processing 400,000 barrels every single day. Jet fuel, ultra-low sulfur diesel. The fuel that keeps cargo planes in the air and shipping trucks moving across Asia and Europe. A facility that was just modernized. A $7.3 billion upgrade completed to make it one of the most advanced refineries in the region. The engineers who designed the expansion probably never imagined that Iranian Shahed drones would find it before the ink on the contracts had fully dried. This morning, offline. Force majeure declared. But here is what makes this moment different from any previous strike in this conflict. Bahrain is not the first. 10 days ago, Qatar Energy halted exports from the world's largest liquefied natural gas facility. Overnight, 20% of global LNG supply disappeared from the market. Kuwait followed with production cuts. Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura refinery, one of the largest on the planet, closed after Iranian strikes reached its perimeter. And now, Bahrain. One by one, the energy infrastructure of the wealthiest oil region on Earth is going dark. There is a pattern here that is not accidental. Iran is not striking randomly. It is working through a list, methodically, publicly, with clear strategic logic. Each target is chosen to maximize economic disruption, while sending an unambiguous message to every Gulf state still hosting American military assets. Your infrastructure is not protected. Your modernization investments mean nothing. Your proximity to U.S. bases is a liability, not a guarantee. And the Gulf states are starting to listen. Qatar's energy minister gave an interview this week and said something that every oil trader on the planet immediately highlighted. He said, and I am paraphrasing, that every Gulf exporter that is not yet declared force majeure is expected to do so within days if this continues. And he put a number on it, $150 per barrel. Not speculation. This is the energy minister of the world's largest LNG exporter telling the market what the trajectory looks like from inside it. I'll show you why the world's emergency response plan has a fatal math problem in about 90 seconds. $6 trillion. That is how much global stock market value has been erased since this war began. Not from one country's markets, from every market simultaneously. Japan's index fell 7% at its worst point today. South Korea dropped 8%. Germany's industrial benchmark down nearly 3%. London down 2%. U.S. futures pointing lower before Wall Street even opened. Samsung, one of the most valuable technology companies in the world, watched its shares fall 12% at open in Seoul. Not because Samsung makes oil, because Samsung needs energy to run its factories. It needs jet fuel to ship products globally. It needs a functioning supply chain. And this morning, the supply chain is not functioning normally. Think about what that actually means at ground level. Samsung semiconductor fabs run 24 hours a day. They cannot pause. They cannot slow down without catastrophic cost. The chips inside your phone, your laptop, your car, they are produced in factories that consume enormous amounts of electricity and require continuous logistics chains to deliver components in and ship finished products out. When fuel prices spike 60% in 10 days, every single link in that chain becomes more expensive simultaneously. This is no longer a Middle Eastern conflict. This is a planetary economic crisis playing out in real time. And it started with a drone hitting a refinery on an island that most people couldn't find on a map before today. The gap between $1.85 gas and $4 gas is not an abstraction. It is every family filling their tank, every small business recalculating delivery costs, every airline repricing every ticket, every grocery store repricing everything that arrived by truck, which is everything. The national gas average in the United States is approaching $4, and analysts project it crosses that threshold within weeks. At the State of the Union, the president stood at the podium and cited $1.85 gas in Iowa as evidence that his energy policy was working. That number has more than doubled since this war started. The political arithmetic of that gap, between the promise and the pump price, is one reason why domestic pressure on this conflict is accelerating faster than the White House expected. The G7, the 7 largest advanced economies, announced this morning that they are coordinating an emergency release from strategic petroleum reserves through the International Energy Agency. The number they put forward, 400 million barrels. That sounds enormous, until you do the arithmetic. At current global daily consumption, 400 million barrels buys approximately 10 to 12 days of supply coverage. After that, the reserve is gone. And the underlying problem, the Strait of Hormuz closed, Gulf production shutting down, refineries burning, still exists. A market analyst described what traders experienced when markets opened this morning. He called it an oil alarm bell and said this time it was not a polite chime. It was a fire siren. Analysts independently projected $150 per barrel by end of March if the strait remains closed. The strait has shown no signs of reopening. Iran has stated explicitly that it will target any American or Israeli vessel attempting transit. Every commercial shipping company with tankers in the region is currently making calculations about whether the insurance premium for a Hormuz transit is worth the risk, and most of them are concluding that it is not. Japan understood this math immediately. Japan has zero domestic oil production. Every factory, every vehicle, every heated building runs on fuel that arrives by ship through those waters. This morning, Japan's government activated its national emergency stockpile, the reserve kept specifically for scenarios where normal supply is disrupted. South Korea's president issued public warnings against panic buying at gas stations. The Philippines Stock Exchange reported sharp losses. Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, every Asian market opened in red. Now, the number. Iran's stated target. Iran's message to the Gulf states this week was not delivered through diplomats. It was not issued as a press release. It was delivered through the smoke rising over Bahrain. And the message was specific. It was public. And it was direct. If the Gulf states can absorb $200 oil, stay with America. If they cannot, separate themselves from this war. $200. That is Iran's stated strategic objective. Not territorial gain. Not a nuclear agreement. The economic mechanism that makes America's continuation of this war politically and financially impossible at home. To understand why Bahrain specifically became the target of the most consequential strike yet, you need to understand what Bahrain did 10 days ago. It became the first Gulf state to fire missiles directly at Iran during this conflict. A decision taken by one of the smallest and most geographically exposed countries in the region. A decision that opened a door Iran has not closed since. The response was not random retaliation. It was a calculated, proportionate, and very public message about what happens to the smallest player when it chooses the wrong side. Today, oil sits at $119. The distance between $119 and $200 is the distance between where this war stands today and where Iran intends to take it. The new supreme leader, who inherited this conflict the day after his father was killed by the strikes that started it, has not asked for a ceasefire. He has not moderated his position. He is watching $119 from Tehran, and he is currently 67% of the way to his target. France's president called Iran's leadership this week asking for the strikes to stop. Iran's response was a question. Did Europe condemn the strikes that killed 170 children in a school? Did anyone use the word accountability before asking Iran to stop responding? Nobody had a good answer to those questions, and the silence that followed them is now shaping how the rest of the world is positioning itself on this conflict. The Swiss government has formally stated that the original American and Israeli strikes constitute a violation of international law. The Pope has called for the bombs to stop. The UN Secretary General called the attacks unlawful. China warned about the flames of war spreading. Russia confirmed it is actively supporting Iran. And America's own National Intelligence Council, its premier intelligence assessment body, formally concluded that this war is unlikely to achieve its stated objectives. The NIC is not a political body. It does not issue assessments designed to embarrass administrations. When it formally concludes that a war is unlikely to achieve its stated goals, it is doing so based on intelligence, modeling, and analysis that it is legally obligated to provide honestly. The fact that this assessment was made public tells you something about the level of concern inside the intelligence community about where this conflict is heading. Every independent institution with credibility is arriving at the same conclusion. The premise was wrong. The execution has produced the opposite of its stated goals. The economic damage is now global, confirmed, and accelerating. The fire at the Bahrain refinery is still being contained as you watch this. 90 years of operations, $7 billion in recent upgrades, 400,000 barrels of daily capacity. This morning, offline, $119 oil. $6 trillion gone from global markets. Japan spending its emergency reserve. South Korea warning against panic. Every airline stock in the world falling simultaneously because jet fuel is tracking toward prices that make commercial aviation economically marginal. This is what $119 oil does. Not just to people filling their cars, but to every interconnected system in a global economy that was built over 50 years on the assumption that Gulf oil would flow reliably through the Strait of Hormuz forever. That assumption is being dismantled, one force majeure declaration at a time. The G7 has 10 to 12 days of emergency supply coverage. After that, the math runs out. Iran's target is $200. The Strait of Hormuz shows no sign of reopening, and the man now running Iran's military strategy is the son of the man America killed to start this war. He is not in a mood to negotiate. Day 10. The fire is still burning. And the next force majeure declaration is already being drafted somewhere in the Gulf.